Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Sam Metcalf. I'm the Midlands editor of thebusinessdesk.com, and welcome to this latest Invest Midlands session. Now, it's been less than a month since the West Midlands mayoral elections, and we're delighted that the newly re-elected victor from that race, Andy Street, has made time in what I'm sure is a hectic schedule to talk to us today. Over the next 15 minutes or so, we'll try and discover what Andy's vision and priorities are for the next 4 years. But as ever, if you have any questions for Andy, please use the chat function along the right-hand side of the screen. Time is tight, but I'll do my best to try and get those questions answered for you. Andy, good afternoon and congratulations.
Yeah, good afternoon, Sam. Nice to be with you all.
Good. Andy, let's go back about a month then, 3 weeks, a month.
3 weeks.
How were the days leading up to the election? And there's somewhat, I guess it must have seemed like an age for the results to come through.
So there's all sorts of answers to that. I guess the first thing to say is I quite like the days before the election. I love the campaigning, actually. You might say there's a masochistic streak in me, but being out talking to people is great fun. You learn a lot, so it was good. A bit tiring, of course, all those hustings you have to do. Then once the ballots closed, we had 2 days to wait. So that was a really chill time. There was, for the first time in months, nothing I could do about anything. So I went to run, I went to see my dad, I did a bit of gardening. So, it was a lovely time. And I just had to wait, and it wasn't too elongated at all. It was all very understandable given the COVID restrictions for the camp.
Cool. Well, when were you confident you'd won? Was it when the results were read out, or was it before that? And why did you think you'd won?
So you never believe it till it's announced by the returning officer something could go wrong. But I had a good feel on the Friday, the day before the results, because we had all the local council election results and we saw the Conservative teams across the region doing incredibly well, actually making good gains in all of our 7 boroughs. So there's a big clue there, but it was only really on the day itself that for certain. And I've learned in this game, you have to remain paranoid until, I used to say in business, you should remain paranoid when you're winning, actually, because it keeps you on your toes. And I think that's even truer here, actually. And why do I think I won? Well, you'll have to ask the 314,000 people who voted for me. But my own answer to that is that 2 things, really. First of all, I think the fact we laid out a really practical plan. It was an ambitious plan, and people thought, yeah, he does know what he's going to do. This isn't just a load of political sound bites. He's actually got a plan of action to be implemented. I think that was important. And I think the other thing, people made their judgment about how I'd gone about the job over the previous 4 years. And I suspect this whole point about being relatively collaborative, working cross-party, bringing business leaders in, all of that had found some favour, actually. So that was encouraging.
Okay. I guess you'd say that the last year of your term, an extra year, of course, but was incredibly tough. But do you think the second term will be tougher than the first, or easier, or about the same?
Yeah, good question. No question about it. It's going to be considerably tougher, I think. And I think there's 2 reasons for that. The first is actually the backdrop to it, the context to it is far more difficult. 4 years ago, actually, the West Midlands was just beginning to perform well after decades of underperformance. And for the first 3 years of my first mayoral term, actually things went pretty well. But this time round, we face a real economic. Sorry, there's some feedback on the line, actually. We face a real economic challenge. So, my goodness, there is a much, much more difficult situation. And the other point, and I draw this out really for people to think about, people doing these jobs across the country have looked to government for investment. And we were no different, and we were actually very good at bringing government investment in. But the truth is, the government have a lot less money to play with than they did 4 years ago. The national financial situation is totally different. So we're going to have to work even harder to get investment into our region.
With that in mind, then, Heather Kirkman there has submitted a question saying, how do you think levelling up with the lack of funding will look like for the Midlands in your next term?
So thank you, Heather. So I guess the first bit of the answer here has to be define levelling up, because everyone thinks levelling up, it's about bridges and roads and railways. And of course, that's a part of it. But I actually don't think that's the heart of it. The heart of it is really all about the opportunities, the employment chances, life chances, you might almost call them, for our less advantaged communities. And the truth is, we were beginning to make progress in terms of that definition of levelling up before the pandemic struck. So we saw far better skills outcomes, far better job opportunities in some of our toughest areas, and that's been pushed back. So the answer to your question, Heather, is yeah, I'm sure we'll get this, that, and the other infrastructure investment, and that's important. But what I am determined to achieve over these next 3 years is we do get back to that whole question of good job opportunities for the areas that are least advantaged. And a key part of that is bringing the inward investment in to create the jobs, and then making sure our young citizens in particular have the skills to get those roles, because that is ultimately what determines people's outcomes in life. And that's what this is all about.
Are those your immediate priorities then? I mean, when we spoke before the election, you said, it was very, very tough to get anything done over the last year. What are your immediate priorities for the West Midlands, and so, for example, what will the first 100 days bring?
Yeah, so the immediate priority, given the situation I've described, it's one word, and I know this can sound oh so simplistic, but I think everyone will nod. It's jobs. The level of unemployment has basically, the level of claimants, not yet formally in the unemployment numbers. The level of claimants has doubled over the last year. And those of you who are slightly longer in the tooth like me will know that what happened in the 1980s was that came and then it became endemic and it stuck. So the real issue now is making sure that does not become endemic. So that means rapid work to get people back into work in the sectors where they've been shed from, so areas like hospitality. It means, of course, getting the big wins like HS2, like the Commonwealth Games, to employ the people who we said they were going to employ. So HS2 alone, we're expecting 5,000 jobs in the next 2 years in the West Midlands. And then, of course, it also means getting people trained for the new sectors, the green sectors in particular. So that is the overriding objective. And what we put out in our plan was details of how this 100,000 was going to be achieved. And my job, frankly, is to be on top of all those numbers to make sure they do come through. So that's a very tough objective. The region has never grown at that sort of pace of jobs, but I genuinely feel it has got to be achieved to stop that unemployment becoming endemic.
Charles has asked, at the beginning of 2020, the Combined Authority and yourself made a commitment to double the scale of the social economy over the next 10 years. Is that objective still in place?
Yes, Charles, thank you for your question. Thank you for your support for that work that was done to get to that. And the one word answer is yes, it is still the objective. And actually, my view is it's even more important given the situation we find ourselves in, because we know that social enterprises tend to be more resilient and actually are very focused in their communities. So we've got the objective. What we now need to get to is the action plan to actually implement that. And as I know Charles knows, there's been work done on the how, and we'll be shortly announcing exactly how that will be done. But it's even more important than it was before, Charles.
Another question from Mark. How much support will be provided to West Midlands businesses and citizens to meet sustainable net zero as you increase your job prospects?
Right. Okay. So, Mark, it seems such a simple question. There's so many different ways this can be taken. It all depends what sector you're in, is the obvious answer. So, first of all, I'm hoping that in the housing instruction sector, we will do the first deal for net zero homes in the region very shortly. I'm also very confident we will move quickly on the whole retrofitting pieces of existing property. And we, for example, have put cash aside for a demonstrator, as we call it. Then we need to win government cash to move at scale. If you are looking at transport innovation, of course, there is £1 billion on the whole green public transport towards the net zero objective. And of course, we've also got our trials for decarbonising a number of our industrial clusters, real focused on the Black Country as the first trial. And of course, the whole gigafactory piece in Coventry for the electrification of the automotive industry is another critical must win in the next period. So there are lots of examples of where we will work to develop the economy in a way that delivers those WM 2041 targets.
Most people would agree that the introduction of the Combined Authority and the introduction of the Mayor has been relatively successful for the West Midlands. Do you think this should be something that should be implemented across the wider Midlands, in the East Midlands, for example?
one-word answer. It's nice when you're all answering me questions I can give with one-word answers. So the answer is yes. I mean, when I stepped forward to do this job in 2016, I walked away from my job in journalism. I knew that we had to prove that there was value in this. And, you know, I'm not naive enough to believe that that question is completely answered so far, but I do think we're well on the way to demonstrating that a single person who unites the leadership of the region, is that interface with central government, can make things happen that previously perhaps things hadn't happened. And if you just look at some of the brownfield sites that were derelict for 20, 30 years that we've now got rebuilding on, there is a clear example of how the link between getting cash out of government, getting a plan for the region, and then getting it implemented through the private sector actually makes a difference. So I do believe this model is right. And I do believe, if I put it really bluntly, that the East Midlands is slightly disadvantaged by not having joined the areas that has a mayor. And remember, there are now 10 big areas of the country. So Sheffield came on board about 2 years ago, North of Tyne 1 year ago, and West Yorkshire just at these last elections. So the direction of travel is clear, Sam.
A question from Ian from Invest Coventry in Warwickshire, your specialist subject, Andy. What thoughts do you have on plans of how we repurpose and support development of the high street? What would you do now if you were still at where you were before?
Well, I wouldn't have closed the shop in Birmingham is the first thing to say, because I think actually you can overreact to the surge online that's come from COVID. And I still believe that the physical and the online have to go hand in glove in a business that differentiates itself on service and product. It is not ever going to be able to out Amazon. So that's the second half of your question. People can just reflect on that, but I do not think they have made the right decision. So in terms of the wider point, now it's interesting. It comes from Ian in Coventry, Warwickshire. So, and the reason I drew that out, I want Coventry to be the exemplar of answering this question. And it's why the Combined Authority has put £98 million aside for the redevelopment of Coventry City Centre. And what we will see there is a genuinely, I think, country leading redevelopment. So we are going, the plan that's just been given planning permission is going to replace a lot of second-rate 1960s retail space. There'll still be good retail in the centre of Coventry, take nothing away from that. The Primark shop is just superb, draws lots of people in, but you don't need the quantity of average space. And that space will be repurposed for quality residential. That's really important to a city like Coventry. There's not enough of it in the city centre. It will have right at the heart of it brilliant performance spaces. So that's just fascinating that that's the driving thought rather than a retail anchor as there was before. It will have public squares and all of that great public realm. And just look at the money the Combined Authorities poured into Coventry, £31 million to completely change the public realm in the city. And look how brilliant that is already looking. Not quite completed, but it will be superb. And of course, a repurposing of the markets. And that's important as well, because people want to support their local businesses like that. They want the whole provenance that a market brings. So in that refurbishment of Coventry City Centre, there are lots of ingredients of what have to be done. And that's why I genuinely think we should be looking there to see how to lead this going forward. And then last thing, Sonnet, just to be brief, of course, the answer for a city centre is totally different from what it has to be for a small local high street. And again, in Coventry, if you look at, say, the Daventry Road parade of shops, just a superb example of serving the local community. Not a single vacant unit there, lots of independent traders. That's the correct formula for local high streets. You're muted.
I say time quickly. I wish we had a longer time together, but
let me ask a Jane's question because it's an important one. So Jane,
sorry, yes, go for it.
She's put in the chat, instrumental in bidding for the Games 2022. How important do you think they are to Birmingham now? And I wanted to come to that because I think it's an extremely important question, and it sort of illustrates. Sorry, we got feedback again, Sam. Sorry, it illustrates exactly what I was talking about. One of the things we've got to do is take advantage of the big wins, the big successes we secured in the first mayoral term, and obviously getting the Commonwealth Games was one of those. And in terms of three things: jobs, investment, and that means an international trade promotion, and of course the whole issues of volunteering participation, whether it be in sport or other voluntary activities, are just superb opportunities for Birmingham. At peak, we're hoping there will be 40,000 roles in the Commonwealth Games. So obviously a critical answer to the economic issues. And remember, the government is investing nearly £1 billion through this. We wouldn't get £1 billion through many other things right at the moment. And we're seeing the transport legacy in terms of Perry-Barr, University Station, the rapid bus routes. So in all sorts of ways, Jane, this is just an incredible opportunity for us, and it could not be coming at a better time. And of course, my personal hope is that it will be the first really huge scale international sports event, which has got full spectators here. And that gives Birmingham and the West Midlands just a brilliant opportunity to frankly show the world what a wonderful, hospitable, meritocratic, inclusive place we are. So it's a superb opportunity, Sam.
Quickly, one thing you didn't do in your first term that you're determined to do this time around?
Yeah, I'll give you two, because they're two quite different things actually. The one that, well, the first answer is the Gigafactory in Coventry. We have to have this for battery production for our automotive industry. Frankly, we were not quite ready in the first term, so but we do have to secure it in the second term. Live conversations with government, and one that got away. It's a small thing, but I think it'll be really totemic when it happens. I've been talking for 3 years now about this Birmingham's equivalent of the High Line. So the New York High Line, the aerial walkway, green walkway through the city, we will do ours in Digbeth on a disused railway viaduct. And again, I think it will just be an incredible tourist attraction for people to come from the whole country, and a green lung for those living in the city. So it's a much smaller scale thing, but actually I think it will really turn people's heads. And it's been not happened yet. So that's got to happen in the second term as well. There's lots more, but those two came immediately to mind, Sam.
Andy, thanks ever so much for being so candid, and thanks to everybody for asking those questions. And congratulations again, and we'll hope to see you again soon.
Thank you very much, Sam. Cheers, bye.
Bye-bye.